Welcome back to Mastering Google Ads, and in Module 5, we're going to be taking you through the core principles that you need for landing pages that convert. In my experience in Google Ads since 2010, quite often I hear from time to time, or unfortunately quite regularly, people will say that they tried Google Ads and it didn't work, that Google Ads is a scam. And a lot of the time when I'm able to look at these campaigns, a lot of the time the problem isn't actually with their Google Ads campaigns, the problem is with the landing pages. What you need to understand for any successful Google Ads campaign or any successful PPC campaign, to be honest, regardless of what platform you're using, any campaign that you have is only as good as the landing page that you're sending people to. So what I wanted to do in this lesson is really take you through 5 core principles that you need to apply to your website. Now, where this has actually come from is when I was consulting about 5 or 6 years ago, I did some work with a user testing company called Testmate, and I really loved their teaching. So a lot of this is coming from the principles that I learned through when I was working with them. And what they are, they provided live user testing. So what would happen is that when they would take on a client, they would do a whole range of user tests with real life user testers and get live feedback about what users liked and didn't like about websites. So the data I'm presenting to you here comes from well over 10,000 real life user tests. So let's dive in, and this is going to be a really important lesson so that you can see full success with your Google Ads campaigns. But the starting point of all of this is that it takes more than just a great campaign. Even the perfect Google Ads campaign structure that has high converting ad copy will fail if you are sending users to a bad landing page. And I'm sure we've all come across this at time to times where you see a landing page and you're just like, I don't know where to look, it's too busy, there's too much stuff happening. So what you really want to be focusing on is not only your campaign, but the landing page that you're sending people to. And what we really want to do is I really want to break down and give you a framework of 5 core factors that you need to have in place. So your landing pages need to have clear messaging of what you do or what you sell. And this is a really important one because quite often we know what we're talking about, but you need to really make sure that very quickly when someone gets onto your landing page, they know what you offer. And remember how I was saying in the ad copy is that what you want to do is you want to make it easy for people to know what their next step is. So you can see that we're building it on each other. So not only have we got good keyword targeting, we've got an ad copy, which is not only relevant, but it's also letting them know about the next step. And then when they get onto the landing page, you're just showing them really clearly, this is how you complete the next step, what we would call a conversion. The next page, you need simple, beautiful design with great images and easy to read messages. It's important to have authority markers and testimonials. You need to be able to remove fear. And then finally, you need to have a simple, easy to use booking or purchase process. You don't want to do all of this hard work and then people don't convert because the conversion process, whether it's a booking online or whether it's a purchase or an inquiry, whatever it is, if it becomes too complicated, people will just leave. So now let's go in and break down all of these messages. So firstly, clear messaging of what you do and what you sell. What you need to ask when you've gone through and created your page is, can a user understand my offer? Do they know what my point of difference is? Can they trust me? And do they know the next step? Now, a great recommendation that I have, especially if you're in a smaller team or you're working by yourself, if you don't have other people to go through and check your websites, I'd just be getting friends and family members to have a read of your website. So send them your website link without saying anything else, and then ask them these questions. What do you think we're trying to offer? What are our main selling points? Do you know what the next step is? And get them to go through these questions without you pre-queuing and explaining how the website works. And that's going to give you a real clear understanding of whether you've got this right, whether other people understand what you're actually trying to offer. Let me just give you some examples. And what we're going to see here is you're going to see some rolling videos. We're going to show some e-commerce examples and then some conversion-based examples. And purely what I just want you to look at as this scrolls up is that you know very clearly what this website is about. So, you can see that it's obviously a clothing and apparel brand. You can also see where you can go quickly into men's, children's, and women's if you want to go straight to footwear. So they're making it really clear where you need to go and what you need to do in order to go on to the next step. Then let's look at this other option. Right at the very start, you can see that it's all about, and it's not only through the words, it's also through the photos, that this is all about where you can book a holiday villas in Italy. And then thirdly, For a service-based industry, once again, Brisbane skip bin hire specialist. So once again, it's just going very, very clearly into what you can book through them and what they offer. So with all of those three examples, you can see they're very, very different websites, but they all have the same thing in common of as soon as you get onto that website, you know exactly what you're there for and what you need to do as the next step. So with your website, what I really want you to go through and do is I really want you to make sure that as soon as someone gets into your website, they know exactly what you offer and they know exactly how you can help them. So now let's also talk about your design. And what you're going to be hearing is simple, beautiful design with great images and easy to read messages. Now, I'm going to explain why we're saying simple, beautiful design. So Testmate, the company I mentioned before, conducted over 10,000 user tests, which observed that websites that are perceived as clean are also often rated as beautiful. When it comes to your websites, oftentimes less is more. And I know that many people think what we just need to do is we need to put all the information there and we need to have it so they can read absolutely everything about us. But sometimes too much information is actually confusing your users. And if there's any confusion points, any areas where people don't understand, they'll just leave the conversion process. So now I want to give you some guidelines for a clean and beautiful website. And the big thing is that you want to only include a short message above the fold of the page and one call to action. Now, if you don't know what above the fold means, that's obviously as soon as you open up to the website, that's the main thing that you see without scrolling. So what you can see, this is an example of one of my landing pages. And the elements that we've got in here is that firstly, we've kept it a lot of space. What we've also done as well is that you can see that main message, learn how to use Google Ads to generate the leads that your business needs. It's very, very clear, but it's also about the user. It's something that even anyone who doesn't know anything about Google Ads would understand what we're offering them. And sometimes that's where people can get into is you get too technical that you're only speaking to highly advanced people. Whereas the goal of, especially on your landing page, is the headline, anyone, even if they've got no experience about what you're selling, they should know and understand your offer. Now, also what I want to point out here is the reason for why the above the fold section is so important is because you'd be surprised how many users don't scroll below the fold. And this is data from Testmate. When you get into demographics of the people over age 50, they've found that over 30% of users don't venture any further than the fold. So they don't scroll down. And that's why it's really important that you also include a call to action right at the top of the page. So you can see here, we've got this call to action in here. Other studies have shown that users spend over 50% of their time on the page above the fold. So when you look at any website or any website that you're creating, you really need to make it possible that people can complete the whole process by not scrolling down on your website further. So on this above the fold section, you need to have a very, very clear and precise message of what you do and how you can help them. But you also need to give that one click button so that they can go to the next step. Now, the other reason for why this is important is because if you're getting people to come onto your page and they've already made a decision to book your service or buy your product, you need to give them an option to be able to buy straight away without having to scroll down through long pages of long form ads, sales copy, or whatever you want to go through. You want to give people the option to get started straight away. Okay, some other core guidelines for clean and beautiful websites. Text is used sparingly and typically does not cover the whole page. And also there is usually no more than 5 lines of heading and body content. So what we mean by that is that you just want to avoid really large chunks of text. And that's because text is more easily absorbed when it's over a third to the half of the page, but not covering the full width. And so what we mean by that is that you don't want your whole width of your page to just be text, especially on a website. Now on a mobile, that does happen, but on a desktop, you don't want it just to be all text all the way across the page. And this is really solidified when we say avoid huge slabs of text. And this is so that users can better scan through your content. 3 or 4 lines of text is good. Once you get over 7, it becomes more daunting to read. So what you want to do is you want to break up your text in a way that people can read the core areas. And then if they want to explore more, that's when they can read extra parts. And that's why if you do have some extra larger sections of text, that's where using things like read more or click for more info buttons become really powerful, because most people will just read the 3 to 4 lines of text. For people who want to read more, you're giving them the option of how they can see more data. Don't forget the use of images to help users absorb more information, and allow spacing between the heading and body text. And then also finally, avoid stock images or stocky icons. And what you're just looking for here is it's just trying to remove the cringe factor. You don't want to seem like your website is overly generic. And this is the same thing that I said with your ad copy. Try to say things that other people can't say, and that flows through to your website as well. You don't just want to go on and just grab, those cheesy stock images. If you are going to use stock images, try to get ones that are not common and that don't look too stocky, if that makes sense. So just what I want to show you in through here, this is some examples. So you can see from here is that, this messaging is all about real Aussies, genuine insights. From here, if you don't know much about the Australian culture, this is like a quintessential Australian guy. He likes his fishing, he likes his boats, but that's tying to the messaging. And then also here, they've personalized the message. They've got Meet Christine, one of our UX researchers. Once again, it's really tying the message that Christine is helping Colin. And those couple of images that are in there, just personalize it all and really reinforce the message that this website is trying to convey. And I want to give you a bad example now. And what you can see from here is that when I went onto this page, the first thing I saw straight away is that the headline is hard to read. You can see here, there's skip bins, this word Brisbane and solutions has gone into the back of the truck. So the headline is hard to read. They've also used, stock images you see through here, all of these images in here. Their call to action is not clear. So you can see a book online here, but you wouldn't say that it's overly clear. It just kind of molds into the rest of the page. And then they've also got these large chunks of text. As you can see, it's just not a friendly or inviting website. So now let's talk about your authority markers and testimonials. So firstly, you need to make sure that your messaging is clear. Then we also want to make sure that we're doing this in a simple way, avoiding those large slabs of text, avoiding stock images, and having personalized images so that it reinforces the message and breaking up your text where possible. So some of the ways that you can add in authority markers in through this website, and this was just a local website, what they used is they just used a plugin to their website which put Google reviews, so verified Google reviews on the bottom of their website. And this became a really, really powerful tool for this business because when people were on their website, they were always able to see different reviews and they were verified reviews. So it wasn't just testimonials they'd put on there. Reviews and testimonials are great, but to make them even better, it's better to get third-party verified. So people know with things like services like Google is that that person has to have a Google profile. The other option in through here is that for this e-commerce brand, they used a review widget in on their product so that people were seeing reviews by the product level. Now, other ways that you can add in authority markers and testimonials, I'm just going to use an example of my website, is that we've got written testimonials here. But what I would say is that if you are going to use written testimonials that don't come in from Google or something like that, is include the name and the company and their position. And the reason for that is because if people were to go and search any of these names, they would see that, not only these real companies, but these people are in the current positions of those companies. The other way that you can do it is just by logos. So for me, especially in the service-based industry, what I've done is I've given some of the brands that I've worked with before. And what this does is it just, rather than me having to explain my experience, just by putting in logos of these are the brands that I've worked with, if people recognize those brands, it gives you straight away some extra credibility. And then what I've also got in through here is that, on this one, I've also used the fact that I've got a YouTube channel and then I've had, how many other people are using our products. So these are all different ways that you can add in authority markers and testimonials. And you can see on this page, especially on your homepage, I've laid it up 3 things in a row, all about just really giving the authority so that people feel like they can trust my messaging and trust what we offer. Now it comes to the important part of removing fear. So 2 great ways that you can add in removing fear is either through a money back guarantee or your returns policy. Now the reason for why removing fear is so important is because, especially if you've got a price point which may be higher than some of your other competitors, if you're offering a returns policy or a money back guarantee or some other way of removing fear, it removes that friction from the buying purchase. Remember what we said, what we're trying to do here with your website is you're trying to remove any obstacles that people would face in order to buy your product. So money back guarantees and return policies a great way of removing fear. And then finally, the simple, easy to use booking or checkout process. Now, when it comes to people who are doing like an e-commerce type of transaction or actually doing the transaction on site, for any sites that are focusing on sales, integrating new payment options like Afterpay or Apple Pay, in which people can add their payment details with a simpler click, they assist with greater conversion. So that's one way that you can do the simple and easy to use checkout process. So you can see here, there's options for Afterpay and also for Google Pay. But what I would also say on that as well is that if you aren't doing an online sales process and you're doing a form inquiry, you really want to make sure that your form is an easy to complete form. A great way of doing this, especially if you've got like an online quote or a more of an extended form, a great way of doing this is making sure that you collect their email details right at the start of the form. So they complete step 1, which is their name and email, which you collect, and then they go into the extended form process. So that way, if the extended form process is too long and they drop out, at least you've got their email so that you can remind them to go through and complete that quote. So the biggest way that I want to really recap with what we've gone through today is if you can just think about when it comes to your landing pages, you want it to be an easy to read website with an easy checkout process or an easy conversion process. And it's really under that theme of removing any barriers that may make it hard for people to complete the conversion process. So go through those 5 factors, go through your websites, and make sure that you are not wasting any money on Google Ads campaigns by sending people to poorly designed or confusing websites.